Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel far back, so far that the map of Japan you know today is still more a patchwork of feuding provinces than a unified nation. The air is cool, damp with morning mist that clings to cedar branches, and the distant sound of temple bells rolls down the valley. You're standing at the edge of a rice field, watching the pale sun creep over a ridge. Somewhere behind you, a rooster calls. Somewhere ahead, the first footfalls of history's most famous warrior class are about to be heard. Let's be honest. If you were dropped here with no GPS, no running water, and no polite roadside convenience store clerk, you wouldn't last more than a day. The winters bite, the summers swarm with insects, and your survival depends on alliances you haven't made yet. And trust me, you really don't want to be caught between rival provincial families right now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love it if you commented with your location and the time you're listening. Maybe you're under a blanket in the dark, or maybe it's sunrise where you are. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins in the late Heian period, roughly the 8th to 10th centuries, when Japan's imperial court in Kyoto reigns over the land in name, but rarely in reach. Out here in the provinces, power flows not from the emperor's seal, but from whoever can keep the harvest safe and collect the taxes. You follow a small group of mounted men riding the narrow dirt road between rice paddies. Their lamellar armor clinks softly with each step of their horses, and long bows rest in their hands. These are not yet the samurai you picture from woodblock prints. They are provincial guards, retainers sworn to protect estates for wealthy aristocrats who rarely leave the capital. The Japanese word saburao, meaning to serve, will give rise to the term samurai. But for now, these men are just Bushi, warriors for hire in a land where order is always fragile. Historians still debate whether the samurai's roots lie more in courtly pageantry or in frontier skirmishes. The truth is probably both. You can imagine them in Kyoto's grand processions, silken banners, polished armor, but also knee-deep in river mud, chasing bandits through bamboo groves. The duality is already there. Refinement and ruthlessness, loyalty and ambition. A quirky image catches your eye. A young warrior adjusting his lacquered quiver while a farmer bows low in the road. The farmer's sandals are made from straw. The warrior's stirrups are carved wood. One harvests grain, the other harvests stability through force. Both know their roles, but only one carries the bow. The political system feeds this development. The imperial court grants large tracts of land, known as shuin, to aristocrats, temples, and shrines. Over time, these estates become semi-autonomous, and their owners need armed men to guard boundaries, enforce rights, and occasionally intimidate rivals. You ride on with the patrol. The mist thins, revealing rolling hills dotted with fortified manor houses. The lords who live here are far from Kyoto's poetry contests and lantern-lit banquets. Their lives are ruled by planting seasons, border disputes, and the constant possibility of raids. One lord you visit is seated in a wooden hall, its roof heavy with thatch, its pillars scented faintly of cedar resin. He greets his warriors with measured words, and you can tell, just from his posture, that their loyalty is the backbone of his authority. Without them, his land is only as strong as the courage of the peasants in the fields. It's a fragile balance, and one that will be tested again and again. But as you leave that hall, hearing the wind rattle the bamboo fence, you can sense the beginnings of something enduring. These men are more than muscle. They are becoming a class with its own identity, its own traditions. And though neither you nor they can see it yet, The name samurai will one day carry their legacy far beyond these quiet hills. The road to Kyoto feels long, even on horseback. You pass under the dappled shade of ancient camphor trees, the air warm and damp with the scent of moss and the distant hint of wood smoke. Every so often, you see a string of pack horses led by merchants, their carts piled high with bolts of silk, baskets of dried fish, and bundles of bamboo. The city is drawing you in, not for trade, but for something subtler. The imperial court is the shimmering center of Heian, Japan. Here, the noble families speak in poetry and wield influence through etiquette as sharp as any blade. Yet beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, there's an unspoken truth. The emperor's authority doesn't extend far beyond the capital. Beyond Kyoto's vermilion gates and manicured gardens, power belongs to those who can enforce it. This is where the early warriors find their way into court life. They are not born courtiers. Many come from provincial clans hardened by years of defending farmlands from bandits or rival landlords. But their loyalty can be bought or earned by those in the palace. You watch as a group of these retainers, their armor polished and crests painted, enter the courtyard of a noble estate. They kneel in perfect unison, offering gifts of fine steel and rare game from the provinces. Historians agree that by the 10th century, the court had begun formally employing these men as protectors of aristocratic estates. Over time, these positions became hereditary, and the warriors themselves began to form distinct kinship networks. That meant that a noble's guards weren't just mercenaries. They were bound by blood, marriage, and clan loyalty. A curious sight lingers with you. A young warrior seated at the edge of a lacquered veranda, carefully copying poetry with brush and ink. His calligraphy is steady, his sword lying unsheathed beside him. He is both student and soldier, courtier and killer. That duality, art and war, will remain at the heart of the samurai ideal for centuries. Still, not all warriors blend easily into this refined world. Some chafe under the elaborate codes of etiquette. Others are dismissed as rustic, their manners too rough for court. Scholars still debate whether these tensions helped shape the early samurai ethos, one that valued personal honor over courtly formality. You walk with a retainer through the palace gardens. The scent of plum blossoms floats in the air. In the distance, the sound of laughter and the twang of a koto string carry from a pavilion. Yet your companion's hand rests on his sword hilt, always alert. It's a reminder. This piece is delicate, and even here, among poetry and painted screens, a wrong word or a sudden insult can lead to steel flashing in the sunlight. Outside Kyoto, the world keeps turning. Clans feud over borders. Pirates raid coastal villages. Bandits prey on travelers along the mountain passes. Every noble in the capital knows that without loyal warriors, their wealth is just a pretty illusion waiting to be taken. And so, the bond between court and sword grows tighter, weaving the early threads of what will become the samurai's defining role. Servants who protect, warriors who rule. The road north grows wilder with every mile. The neatly bordered rice paddies give way to thick forests of pine and cedar, their branches heavy with morning dew. Rivers run fast and cold here, and the mountains rise like dark sentinels on the horizon. You can almost taste the shift in the air. It smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and something faintly metallic, like the edge of a blade. You're heading toward the frontier, where the imperial court's power is little more than a rumor. This is the land of the Emishi, fierce, semi-nomadic people who have resisted imperial expansion for centuries. They know the forests and rivers like you know your own hands, and they fight with a cunning that frustrates the well-drilled ranks of court armies. By the 8th and 9th centuries, the Emishi have become the primary concern for the northern campaigns. The imperial court, seeking to expand its influence, dispatches soldiers and provincial warriors to subdue them. You ride alongside one such force. Archers mounted on sturdy ponies, their armor lacquered in dark hues to blend into the woodland shadows. Historians agree that these campaigns were formative for the samurai. Fighting the Emishi wasn't like fighting another noble's retainers near Kyoto. Here, battle was a matter of survival. The Emishi favored ambushes, swift cavalry raids, and sudden withdrawals. To match them, Japanese warriors had to adapt, learning hit-and-run tactics, improving their horsemanship, and refining the art of mounted archery. One curious detail stands out. Emishi riders were known for their skill with long, curved bows, and some scholars suggest their techniques influenced the Japanese yumi. You watch a samurai loose an arrow at full gallop, the shot landing true on a target far ahead. His grin afterward is more boyish than warlike. And you realize that in these wilds, victory often comes down to who learns faster. But the wars are long, grueling, and costly. Fortified outposts are built along the frontier, each one a mix of barracks, stables, and wooden palisades. At night, the wind moans through the gaps in the walls, and you can hear the low murmur of warriors telling stories around the fire, tales of narrow escapes, legendary duels, and phantom warriors seen in the mist. Historians still debate the full outcome of these wars. Some argue that the Emishi were absorbed into Japanese society, becoming allies and even joining the warrior class. Others believe their distinct culture faded slowly under the weight of imperial authority. As you pass a village where Emishi and Japanese live side by side, trading goods and sharing fishing rights, you see that the truth might be somewhere in between. The campaigns leave their mark. The warriors who return to Kyoto or to their provincial estates carry not just scars and trophies, but a hardened sense of identity. They are no longer mere guards or enforcers. They are veterans of a frontier war, with their own ways of fighting and their own sense of pride. As you ride back south, the mountains fading into the haze, you can almost feel the shift in the air. A warrior class is taking shape, forged not in the polished halls of the capital, but in the damp forests and muddy fields of the north. And their story is only beginning. The road south from the Emishi frontier winds through green valleys and fishing villages, then on toward the broad plains where the heart of Japan's provinces beats. The pace feels slower now, but beneath the calm surface, the countryside hums with a quiet, shifting energy. You can see it in the way local lords drill their men, in the guarded looks exchanged between rival retainers, in the subtle tightening of fingers on bowstrings as you pass. By the 10th and 11th centuries, these provincial warriors are no longer a loose scattering of estate guards and hired swords. They are beginning to think of themselves as Bushi, men of arms bound not just by contract, but by a shared way of life. The term carries a certain pride, a recognition that their skills, honor, and loyalty are as much a form of currency as the rice and silk that pay them. You stop at a manor house surrounded by wooden palisades and a deep moat. Inside, a young lord sits cross-legged on a reed mat, reviewing petitions from peasants. At his side kneels his most trusted Bushi, helmet resting on the floor, hands folded on his knees. His job is not just to fight, but to advise, to carry messages, to act as an extension of his lord's will. This blending of martial and administrative duty will become a hallmark of the samurai role in centuries to come. A quirky detail catches your attention. Many of these warriors wear small charms tucked into their armor, tiny wooden plaques inscribed with prayers or folded bits of paper from Shinto shrines. They are reminders that protection comes not only from skill and steel, but from unseen forces. The Bushi are learning to see themselves as part of a hierarchy. Loyalty runs upward to the lord, the clan, the province, and downward to those they command. But here lies the first seed of tension. What happens when loyalty to one's lord conflicts with loyalty to one's own honor? Historians still debate how early this moral dilemma began to take root. But even now, you can sense the weight of it in the quiet exchanges between warriors. In the training yard, you watch as two Bushi practice mounted archery. The horses snort and stamp as the men gallop toward straw targets, loosing arrows in smooth, fluid arcs. Their armor gleams in the sun, lacquered plates over silk padding, crests carved in bold designs. Between runs, they speak in low voices, critiquing each other's form with the easy camaraderie of men who know they may someday fight side by side or against each other. As you walk through the village below, you notice how the presence of these warriors changes the rhythm of life. Merchants sell better goods, farmers seem more secure, and the roads feel safer, at least within the shadow of the Lord's domain. Beyond that, the old dangers still linger. Bandits watch the borders, and rival lords' scouts slip through the hills at night. The Bushi are no longer just a convenience for the court or the nobility. They are becoming indispensable. And with that necessity comes power. Power that will soon draw them into conflicts far greater than guarding a single estate. You can almost feel the air tightening, like the string of a bow pulled back but not yet released. You arrive in Kyoto just as the sun is beginning to dip, the light turning the city's tiled roofs into a sea of gold and shadow. The streets are alive with a mixture of sounds. The chatter of merchants, the shuffle of servants carrying trays of lacquerware, the far-off clang of temple bells. But the center of gravity here is not the emperor himself. It is the Fujiwara clan. For generations, the Fujiwara have perfected the art of ruling from behind the throne. They marry their daughters into the imperial family, act as regents for young emperors, and control court appointments. Their power is not loud or violent. It is the slow, deliberate tightening of a silken cord. But the Fujiwara, for all their subtlety, still need muscle. That is where the Bushi find their way into the highest levels of politics. You watch as a Fujiwara retainer, his armor polished to a mirror shine, rides through the capital on official business. People step aside in quiet deference. His presence says as much as any decree, that the clan's will can be enforced not just with ink and seals, but with the cut of a blade. Historians agree that during this era, the reliance on provincial warriors deepens. The court still clings to its rituals, but real stability depends on men who can command loyalty far from Kyoto. The Fujiwara know this well, and they cultivate alliances with powerful warrior families in the provinces. One of those alliances is with the Taira and Minamoto clans, names that will soon dominate Japan's political stage. Right now, their leaders serve loyally, sending their sons to Kyoto as pages and guards. The young warriors walk the palace corridors in fine robes over their armor, learning court etiquette by day and drilling in the yards by night. A quirky image lingers in your mind. A Fujiwara banquet where poets recite verses under paper lanterns, while in the shadows at the edges of the hall, armed retainers watch silently, sipping tea. It's a reminder that in this world, art and violence share the same stage, but there is a shadow beneath the refinement. The Fujiwara's power is immense, yet it breeds resentment. Other clans chafe under their dominance, and provincial lords begin to wonder why they should bow to a distant court when they already have armed men, loyal followers, and rich lands of their own. Historians still debate whether the Fujiwara saw this storm coming or believed their alliances were unshakable. As night falls over Kyoto, you hear the faint strains of a flute from a nearby garden. Somewhere, a warrior leans against a gatepost, hand resting on the hilt of his sword. In the moonlight, the lacquer on his armor glints like water. And you realize that the balance of power in Japan is already shifting, quietly, inevitably, toward those who carry the bow and the blade. The first whispers of tension between the Taira and Minamoto reach you not in the clamor of battle, but in the quiet, smoke-filled rooms of Kyoto's inns. Merchants speak in low voices about favors denied, land grants contested, and hunting parties that ended with more arrows loosed than game caught. It is still polite rivalry, barely, but you can feel the undercurrent pulling both clans toward open conflict. Both families have earned the court's favor through years of service. The Taira, skilled in naval warfare and coastal defense, have secured vital trade routes and suppressed pirates in the inland sea. The Minamoto, hardened on the northern frontiers against the Emishi, have the air of men who have never met a problem that couldn't be solved with a decisive charge. You travel to a provincial muster where young warriors from both clans train in adjacent fields. From a distance, it is a beautiful sight. Horses in full gallop, arrows thudding into straw targets, the ring of blades on wooden posts. Up close, the glances between the groups are sharp, measuring. When the contests end, the applause from one side barely reaches the other. Historians agree that the rivalry intensified during the Hogan Rebellion of 1156, when a succession dispute within the imperial court drew both clans into opposing camps. In the humid summer air, you ride through Kyoto's narrow lanes as armored men gather at their lord's compounds. Couriers dash past, sandals slapping on wet stones, carrying messages that may decide which banner is raised over the palace gates. A curious image stays with you. During one tense night, Minamoto's scouts slip through the city disguised as monks, prayer beads swinging as they whisper counts of enemy numbers. The line between war and deception has always been thin in samurai life. The Taira's eventual triumph after the Hogan Rebellion shifts the balance. They now hold more posts at court, more influence over imperial decrees. Yet victory breeds overreach. The Minamoto, bruised but not broken, retreat to their strongholds, training a generation that will remember every slight. Scholars still argue whether the Taira realized, even then, that their greatest enemy's resolve was only hardening. As you leave the city, riding past rice fields glistening under the late afternoon sun, you hear the clink of armor from a nearby training yard. Two boys, barely in their teens, are practicing with wooden swords under the watchful eye of an older retainer. One bears the Taira crest, the other the Minamoto. They laugh now, but you can't help but wonder how long it will be before they meet again under very different skies. Winter in Kyoto brings a strange, brittle silence. The Kamo River runs low and cold, its banks crusted with frost. In the narrow streets, the sound of clogs on frozen stones echoes like distant drumbeats. The city feels poised on a knife edge, and you can almost hear the thin thread of tension between the Taira and Minamoto straining in the cold air. The year is 1159, and a fresh crack in the imperial court has opened. The Heiji Rebellion begins not with a grand proclamation, but with swift, decisive strikes. You walk the darkened corridors of a noble's compound as word spreads. Taira no Kiyomori, head of the Taira clan, has left the capital on a pilgrimage, and Minamoto no Yoshitomo sees his chance. Warriors gather by torchlight, their breath steaming, armor creaking as they mount up. Under the cover of night, the Minamoto move quickly, seizing the retired emperor and the reigning emperor in a daring coup. The capital wakes to find the palace gates under new guard, the Minamoto banners fluttering in the winter wind. There is a brief moment, a heartbeat, when it seems the Minamoto may finally eclipse their rivals. But Kiyomori returns sooner than expected. His march back into Kyoto is like a sudden storm rolling over the plains. The Taira forces, disciplined and swift, press into the city's heart. Battles erupt in the narrow streets, the clash of steel ringing off the wooden walls of merchant houses. Historians agree that this urban fighting was unlike the open field battles of the past, chaotic, brutal in its precision, and decided as much by quick thinking as by raw strength. A curious detail. Some accounts claim that warriors used flaming arrows, not just to burn enemy positions, but to create sudden walls of smoke, cutting off sight lines in Kyoto's tight alleys. Whether entirely true or embellished, it paints a vivid picture of how strategy adapted to the city's geography. The Minamoto resistance collapses within days. Yoshitomo flees into the countryside, but betrayal waits along the road. By the year's end, Taira dominance is absolute. Minamoto's sons are hunted, captured, or exiled, though a few, including a boy named Yoritomo, survive under watch in distant provinces. Scholars still debate whether Kiyomori intended mercy for these children, or simply underestimated how time and memory would sharpen their will. As winter loosens its grip and the first plum blossoms appear along Kyoto's avenues, you watch Taira retainers ride through the city gates in ceremonial procession. Their armor gleams, their banners snap in the wind, and yet, somewhere far from here, Minamoto bloodlines endure. Quiet, patient, waiting for the season to turn. The year is 1180, and Kyoto feels heavy under a summer haze, the air so still that even the cicadas seem reluctant to sing. But beneath this oppressive quiet, the earth is shifting. Whispers run through the markets, temples, and tea houses. Prince Mochihito has issued a call to arms, and the Minamoto banners are stirring again. You are there in the courtyard of a country manor when a messenger arrives, his horse lathered with sweat, scroll in hand. The seal is broken, the words read aloud. The Minamoto summon warriors to rise against the Taira. It is not just revenge, though there is plenty of that, but a challenge to the Taira's grip over the imperial court. Men who have simmered under Taira dominance for 2 decades suddenly have a cause worth unsheathing their swords for. The Genpei War begins like a thunderstorm building over the sea. First, a distant rumble, then sudden flashes of lightning across the horizon. The Taira respond quickly, sending forces to quash the uprising, but the conflict spreads. You march alongside warriors through mountain passes where the fog hangs low, and through river valleys where the water runs red at sunset, not with horror, but with the reflection of war banners in the evening light. Historians agree this war was a turning point in Japanese history, fought not only on land, but across waterways. With the Taira's naval skill matched against Minamoto adaptability, one of the quirkiest details is how the tides themselves could decide battles. More than one skirmish ended because a rising tide swallowed a sandbar, stranding or freeing entire divisions. You find yourself at the Battle of Uji, where Minamoto forces tear up the planks of a bridge to slow the Taira advance. Arrows whistle over the river, splintering against shields. Warriors wade into the current, some swept downstream in the chaos. In this war, ingenuity often matters as much as valor. The campaigns roll on for years, each side claiming victories, suffering defeats, and regrouping. Towns change hands, castles burn, and alliances shift like the wind. Scholars still debate whether the Minamoto's ultimate triumph was due to superior strategy, better logistics, or simply the slow accumulation of Taira mistakes. By 1185, the tide, both literal and metaphorical, turns at Dan no Ura. You stand on the shore, the wind whipping salt spray into your face as the two fleets collide. The Minamoto archers rain death from the decks, and the currents pull the Taira ships into disarray. In the chaos, the young emperor Antoku is lost to the sea, carried down into legend by his grandmother. When the battle ends, the Taira are gone, drowned scattered or dead on the decks of their shattered ships. The Minamoto stand victorious, their banners snapping in the sea wind. But even in triumph, you can feel the weight of what comes next. Victory is only the first step toward power. And power, as history always shows, carries its own dangers. The salt still clings to your skin from Dan no Ura when the road to Kamakura opens before you. A long, winding path that leads away from Kyoto's gilded palaces into a land of pine forests, fishing villages, and windswept beaches. Here, far from the ceremonial weight of the imperial court, Minamoto no Yoritomo builds something entirely new. The year is 1192, and Yoritomo has been appointed Sai-i Taishogun, barbarian subduing generalissimo. Historians agree that this marks the formal birth of Japan's first shogunate, though, in truth, the framework has been forming for years. You walk the streets of Kamakura and notice immediately how different it feels from Kyoto. There is no constant echo of temple bells or rustle of court silks. Instead, you hear the hammering of carpenters building warehouses, the calls of merchants unloading goods, and the distant shouts of warriors drilling in open fields. Yoritomo's government is practical, almost austere. The imperial court still exists, but the true machinery of power now rests here, in the bakufu, the tent government of the shogun. Appointments are made based on loyalty and service, not simply birth. Yoritomo stations Jito, stewards, and Shugo, military governors, across the provinces to ensure taxes are collected, justice enforced, and dissent watched carefully. A quirky image stays with you. The shogun himself rarely appears in full ceremonial armor unless necessary. Instead, he often wears simple hunting clothes while holding council, as though to remind his retainers that power lies in readiness, not display. Yet when he does don the full regalia, the sight is unforgettable. Lacquered plates shimmering black and red, a tall crest like the rising sun itself. Kamakura's defenses are as much about geography as men. Hills hem in the city on 3 sides, and the sea guards the 4th. Narrow passes can be blocked with simple barricades, and coastal lookouts spot trouble before it reaches the harbor. Scholars still debate whether Yoritomo chose Kamakura primarily for its defensibility, or because it lay in the heart of his clan's power base. But either way, it becomes the perfect seat for a military government. Walking along the beach at dusk, you watch warriors practicing mounted archery on the sand, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. The thunder of hooves mingles with the hiss of waves, a rhythm that seems to bind land and sea into one. Kamakura is not a place of idle beauty. It is a place built for endurance, and yet, as the city grows, so too does the weight of governing an entire country. Alliances must be maintained, disputes settled, and the balance with Kyoto carefully managed. For now, the system holds. But history has a way of testing every new order, and you can already feel distant storms gathering beyond the horizon. The air in Kamakura is heavy with summer heat when the first rumors arrive. Ships, larger than any fishing vessel, have been seen far to the west. The year is 1274, and while Yoritomo is long gone, the shogunate he founded still stands, now under the Hojo regents. Word spreads quickly. The Mongol Empire, whose riders have swept across continents, is turning its gaze toward Japan. You walk through the bustling streets and hear conflicting whispers. Some scoff, claiming no foreign power could breach Japan's shores. Others recall the Mongols' conquests in China and Korea, speaking with a quiet unease. Historians agree that the Mongol threat was unlike anything the samurai had faced. An enemy not bound by the same codes of combat, arriving with unfamiliar tactics and weapons. By autumn, the threat becomes reality. You stand on the beach at Hakata Bay, watching the horizon darken with sails. The Mongol fleet moves like a living wall, their banners snapping in the wind. When the first arrows fly, you notice something strange. Small bombs that burst with thunder and smoke, weapons utterly alien to Japanese warriors. The fighting is fierce. The Mongols fight in tight formations, drums pounding to keep their lines in rhythm, while the samurai favor individual duels and sudden charges. One quirky image lodges in your mind. A lone samurai, eager to challenge an enemy champion, riding out in full armor, only to be met with a hail of arrows from the entire Mongol line. It is a clash of worlds, and the samurai must adapt quickly. Night brings an unexpected turn. A storm rises from the sea, its winds shrieking through the masts. The Mongol fleet, unprepared for the violence of a Japanese typhoon, scatters into chaos. By morning, wreckage litters the shoreline, and the survivors retreat. The invasion has failed, but no one in Kamakura believes the danger is gone. 7 years later, in 1281, the Mongols return, this time with an even larger force. The samurai have prepared, building walls along Hakata Bay, fortifying every possible landing site. You run your hand along the stone, feeling the grooves worn into it by carpenters' chisels. When the enemy arrives, the fighting is brutal. But again, the weather turns. Another great storm, later called Kamikaze, the divine wind, rips through the fleet, sealing the invaders' fate. Scholars still argue whether these storms were mere chance or divine intervention. But in the samurai's mind, the gods themselves had defended Japan. You stand on the shore after the second storm, the sky washed clean, the air salty and sharp. The horizon is empty again, but the story of the Mongol invasions will ripple through samurai culture for centuries, shaping their pride, their tactics, and their belief that the land of the rising sun is blessed and worth defending at all costs. The storms that broke the Mongol fleets seem like a lifetime ago when you next walk through the gates of Kyoto. The city is vibrant but restless, its streets caught between elegance and unease. It is the mid-14th century, and the Kamakura Shogunate, so confident in its walls and order, has fallen. In its place rises a new power, the Ashikaga Shogunate. You can almost smell the shift in the air. The Hojo regents, who once ruled in the shogun's name, have been overthrown in the chaos of the Genpei War. Now, Ashikaga Takauji, a former Kamakura general turned rebel, claims the shogunate. Historians agree that his rise was as much about political calculation as battlefield victory. You walk beside his retinue as they pass, his banners embroidered with gold thread, his expression steady and unreadable. Unlike Kamakura's austere governance, the Ashikaga court brings the shogunate back to Kyoto, close to the emperor. This proximity to imperial culture shapes their reign. Zen gardens bloom within temple walls, ink paintings flourish, and the tea ceremony takes on refined form. Yet beauty is not peace. You soon learn that Takauji's hold on power is far from secure. A curious detail catches your attention. Some of the Ashikaga's earliest allies turn on them within months, driven by personal rivalries and shifting loyalties. It's as if Kyoto itself, with its dense web of intrigue, makes betrayal inevitable. The 15th century sees the cracks widen. You walk through the charred remains of districts after the Onin War, a conflict that begins as a dispute over succession, but swells into a nationwide civil war. For over a decade, the capital is a battlefield of feuding samurai families. Scholars still debate whether the Ashikaga ever truly controlled the country beyond Kyoto. Their authority often feels more symbolic than absolute. And then comes the Sengoku Jidai, the Warring States period. The land fractures into dozens of domains, each ruled by a daimyo, with ambitions as sharp as his sword. Castles rise on hilltops, roads bristle with armed patrols, and messengers ride day and night carrying orders for sieges and alliances. You watch a meeting between two rival lords, each bowing low, exchanging gifts, speaking with the utmost courtesy, while their retainers in the shadows tally troop numbers and study the weaknesses in each other's defenses. The samurai here have become not just warriors, but politicians, diplomats, and spies. It is a world where loyalty can change in a single season, where victory is never final, and where the idea of Japan as one unified realm feels like a story for another lifetime. But somewhere in this chaos, seeds of unification are quietly taking root. The Sengoku period is a restless sea, and from its churning waves rise three men who will change the course of Japan forever. You hear their names whispered first in the markets and tea houses. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Each a force in his own way, each stepping into the storm with eyes fixed on unification. It is the mid-16th century, and gunpowder has arrived on Japanese shores. You stand on a rocky beach in Tanegashima in 1543, watching Portuguese traders unload matchlock arquebuses, their polished barrels gleaming in the sun. Historians agree this moment alters warfare in Japan forever. Nobunaga is one of the first to see their potential, incorporating firearms into his armies with ruthless efficiency. You march with Nobunaga at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, where his troops, arranged behind wooden palisades, unleashed disciplined volleys that tear through Takeda cavalry. It is a victory that feels almost modern, less about the lone hero's charge and more about coordinated firepower. A quirky detail lingers. Some chronicles say the soldiers timed their shots with water clocks, ensuring constant, overlapping fire. Whether myth or truth, it shows Nobunaga's blend of discipline and innovation. But Nobunaga's ambition makes enemies as quickly as it makes victories. You are in Kyoto in 1582 when the betrayal comes. His own general, Akechi Mitsuhide, turns against him at Honnoji. The temple burns and Nobunaga takes his own life. The city wakes to the scent of ash, and the first unifier is gone. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's brilliant lieutenant, rises in his place. Born a peasant, he climbs through cunning, charisma, and relentless drive, eventually ruling all of Japan. You watch him order sweeping reforms, land surveys, class separations, massive construction projects. Hideyoshi builds Osaka Castle, a fortress so grand it seems more like a city than a stronghold. Yet his ambitions reach beyond Japan. You follow his forces to the Korean Peninsula in the 1590s, a campaign historians still debate. Was it a bid for glory, a strategic move, or simply overreach? The invasions drain resources, and when Hideyoshi dies in 1598, his legacy is powerful but fragile. In the shadows stands Tokugawa Ieyasu, patient as the turning tide. He waits, building alliances, gathering strength, until the moment comes. That moment is the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, a clash that decides the fate of the realm. You stand on the foggy field as banners snap in the wind, and betrayal once again shapes the outcome. Ieyasu emerges victorious, the last of the three unifiers, ready to forge a peace that will last for centuries. The year is 1603, and Edo, once a modest fishing village, now hums with the sound of hammers and saws. You arrive just as Tokugawa Ieyasu receives the title Sei-i Taishogun, cementing his authority over the realm. This marks the beginning of the Edo period, a time that will come to be remembered as an age of peace and stability for the samurai. Though it is a peace built on careful control, walking through the streets, you notice how quickly Edo is transforming. Wooden bridges span the canals, merchant stalls line the roads, and the scent of fresh tatami mats mingles with the aroma of grilled fish. Samurai in crisp kamishimo patrol the avenues, their swords polished not for battle, but as symbols of rank and duty. It feels strange, almost dissonant. The warrior class now tasked less with constant fighting and more with governance, ceremony, and the performance of loyalty. Ieyasu's genius lies not in constant conquest, but in building a system that prevents it. The Bakuhan system divides power between the shogunate and the daimyo, with each domain allowed a degree of autonomy so long as they obey Edo's rules. The most subtle yet effective control is the policy of Sankin Kotai, requiring lords to spend alternating years in the capital, leaving their families behind as honorable hostages when they return home. It is brilliant in its quiet way, ensuring loyalty without constant bloodshed. Historians agree that this policy drains the coffers of even the wealthiest lords, as they are compelled to maintain 2 lavish residences and travel with grand retinues to display their status. The roads themselves, like the Tokaido, become arteries of culture, commerce, and gossip, lined with inns, tea houses, and woodblock print sellers eager to depict the latest procession of armored banners. You pass through one of these processions yourself. The rhythmic clatter of geta sandals on packed dirt, the rustle of silk, the soft jingle of sword fittings. But you also notice something curious. Many of these samurai have never drawn their blades in combat. Generations are growing up in peace, learning poetry, calligraphy, and Confucian ethics alongside martial skills. Their identity is still rooted in the way of the warrior. But the battlefield has shifted. Now it is one of etiquette, diplomacy, and prestige. Yet peace does not erase tension. Behind sliding doors in Edo's estates, daimyo plots subtle moves to expand influence, navigating the web of alliances with as much care as a swordsman navigating a duel. Some scholars argue that the very strictness of Tokugawa law, limiting trade, movement, and foreign contact, was both the reason for Japan's long peace and the cause of its eventual vulnerability. Occasionally, small uprisings break out in rural areas, peasants protesting high taxes or unfair treatment. But the shogunate's reach is long, and when the sword must be unsheathed, it is done swiftly, almost ritually, before peace settles again like fresh snow. You spend a quiet evening in Edo, watching a no performance sponsored by a powerful daimyo. The stage is bare save for a painted pine tree, the movement slow and deliberate, the chanting voices weaving an ancient story. The samurai in the audience watch with the same attentiveness they might give a battle strategy. You realize that in this era, the preservation of tradition is as much a duty as the defense of the realm. But nothing lasts forever. Beyond Japan's closed borders, the world changes rapidly. Gunships, steam power, and imperial ambitions are brewing across distant oceans. For now, Edo sleeps peacefully under the watch of the Tokugawa, but you can almost feel the faint tremor of change approaching, like a ripple on a still pond before the wind begins to stir. It is the middle of the 19th century, and Edo still glitters under the Tokugawa's orderly hand. But a shift is in the air, one that even the most disciplined daimyo cannot ignore. You stand on the shore at Uraga in 1853, watching as 4 black-hulled ships glide into the bay, their steam engines hissing, their cannons silent but ready. They are unlike anything you have seen before. Massive, ironclad, reeking of coal smoke. Commodore Matthew Perry and his American fleet have arrived. Historians agree that this moment is a shock to Japan's self-contained world. For over 2 centuries, the country has maintained an isolationist policy, sakoku, limiting foreign trade to a single Dutch post at Nagasaki. But now, under the shadow of these black ships, the Tokugawa shogunate is forced to sign treaties that open ports to foreign powers. Some samurai see this as a necessary adaptation. Others view it as a humiliation too deep to bear. You walk through Edo in the months that follow and hear the city hum with restless talk. Young samurai study Western firearms and ship design, while others sharpen their swords and mutter about driving the foreigners out. The slogan, Sono Joy, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, begins to appear scrawled on wooden walls. The balance that has kept the Tokugawa in power for over 250 years begins to crumble. The daimyo of powerful Western domains, Satsuma, Choshu, Tosa, start building alliances, arming with both rifles and cannons. Many of these men are from families that have quietly resented Edo's dominance for generations. You see it in their eyes when they meet in guarded tea houses. They are thinking about more than foreign ships. They are thinking about who should truly rule Japan. The turning point comes with the Bushi War of 1868. You march with imperial forces under the banner of the rising sun, hearing the beat of drums echo in the snowy hills of Toba Fushimi. The Tokugawa troops fight hard, but their resolve falters as daimyo defect to the imperial cause. One quirky scene stays with you. Samurai in lacquered armor charging alongside men in European-style uniforms, the clash of centuries compressed into a single battlefield. By the year's end, Edo surrenders without a final desperate battle. The shogunate dissolves, and the emperor, long a symbolic figure under Tokugawa rule, is restored to actual power in what will be called the Meiji Restoration. Historians still debate whether this transition was inevitable or could have been avoided with reforms. But to you, it feels like watching the tide pull away from the shore. You can't stop it. Only watch as it takes everything with it. The new government moves swiftly. The samurai class, once the pinnacle of Japan's social order, is abolished in law. Stipends are converted to government bonds, swords are banned from being worn in public, and military service becomes the duty of all men, not just the warrior caste. Some samurai adapt, becoming teachers, bureaucrats, or industrialists. Others cannot bear the loss of identity, wandering into obscurity or rebellion. The last great stand comes in 1877, with the Satsuma Rebellion led by Saigo Takamori. Once a hero of the Restoration, now a symbol of samurai defiance. You follow him into the misty hills of Kyushu, where a few thousand warriors, clad in traditional armor, face a modern imperial army armed with rifles and artillery. It is a doomed fight, but fought with such stubborn honor that it will be remembered in songs and plays for generations. When the final shots fade and Saigo falls, it feels like the closing of a book that has been written for nearly 1,000 years. The samurai as a class are gone, but the spirit, the bushido, the discipline, the sense of duty remains, carried into a modern Japan that is rapidly stepping onto the global stage. You walk away from the battlefield with the strange feeling that the samurai have not truly died. They have simply changed their armor. The guns have gone silent. The armor is stored away. And yet you still feel the echo of the samurai in every corner of Japan. It is the late 19th century now, the Meiji era in full stride, and the streets of Tokyo, no longer Edo, are filled with a strange blend of the ancient and the new. Wooden shop fronts stand beside brick government buildings. Rickshaws clatter alongside imported carriages. Top-knotted elders pass young men in bowler hats. The samurai may have lost their legal privileges, but their code, the Bushido, is far from forgotten. It begins to take on new life, not as the daily rulebook of a warrior, but as a national ideal. Schools teach loyalty, honor, and discipline with the same seriousness once used to drill sword forms. Military academies adopt the language of the samurai to shape soldiers for a modern conscript army, even in the bustling offices of government ministries. You hear phrases about duty to the nation that sound eerily like those once sworn to a feudal lord. You wander into a small dojo on a quiet back street where a few former samurai teach kendo, the way of the sword, now using bamboo practice swords and armor designed to prevent injury. The swish of the shinai, the shouted kiai, the precise stances. These are not just exercises. They are rituals keeping the warrior spirit alive in a world that no longer needs warriors. Some of these men fought in the Bushi War or the Satsuma Rebellion, and their students listen with wide eyes, hearing firsthand about battles they will never fight. In art and literature, the samurai are already becoming legends. Kabuki stages retell the heroic last stands of loyal retainers. Woodblock prints show gallant warriors locked in duels under moonlit skies. Even the new medium of photography captures stern former samurai in their finest armor. Posed, but with eyes that seem to look past the camera into another century entirely. Historians still debate how much of the Bushido we know today was truly lived by the medieval samurai, and how much was reimagined in the Meiji period to inspire modern nationalism. Was the way of the warrior always this codified? Or is it, in part, a story that Japan tells itself? An idealized past to guide a rapidly changing present? The truth, as always, is somewhere between the scrolls and the songs. As the decades pass, the legacy of the samurai seeps into every layer of Japanese culture. You see it in the meticulous craft of a swordsmith who forges blades more as art than weapon. You hear it in the polite, deliberate way a bow is given before a sumo match. You feel it in the careful tending of a garden, each stone placed with purpose. The discipline, the focus, the aesthetic of restraint, they all echo the warrior's training, and yet there's a bittersweet note. Walking through a modern boulevard, you pass a government parade with soldiers in Western-style uniforms. Their rifles gleam, their boots thud in unison. The samurai spirit may live on, but the world has chosen steel barrels over curved blades, national armies over personal retinues. Still, in the quiet moments, in a tea house where the host kneels with perfect grace, in a lone fisherman's steady patience at the riverbank, in the soft rasp of a whetstone sharpening a kitchen knife, you catch glimpses of that older rhythm, the one that carried the samurai through centuries of chaos and change. The samurai may have walked their last battlefields long ago, but they have never entirely left Japan. They linger in memory, in ritual, in the way the country holds itself with quiet dignity, even as it strides into the modern world. And as you take one last slow walk through the streets of Tokyo at dusk, the lanterns flickering to life, you can almost imagine you hear the faint echo of armor plates clinking in the shadows, like a reminder that honor once forged endures far beyond the hand that wields the sword. Wind down 300 words. Now, the streets grow quieter, and the soft orange glow of paper lanterns warms the cool night air. You've walked centuries tonight, through dusty training yards, across battlefields, into the polished halls of shoguns, and down into the hum of modern cities. The noise of history has faded into something gentler, almost like the steady beat of a distant drum, soft enough to lull you towards sleep. The faces of the samurai drift past your mind's eye, stern and proud, but also human. They smile in small, private ways. They share cups of tea with comrades. They kneel in gardens and tend moss with the same care they once gave to their swords. In this slow rhythm, time folds in on itself. The old and the new blur together until they are one. The samurai's world is gone, but their essence lingers, not in battles or in law, but in the quiet moments between. A well-tied knot, a perfectly timed bow, a pause to listen before speaking. These are small, human things, and perhaps that's why they endure. As you breathe slower, the stories slip into the background, the voices of the past becoming a faint murmur. The night deepens. Somewhere, the moon catches on the curve of an unused blade, and for a heartbeat, you can almost believe the centuries are still watching. Sleep well, traveler. The journey is done.